All right, episode 26 of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
This week, the debates were announced for the upcoming presidential election, and this is something everybody's been waiting for, right, Keith?
Well, it has been, and it sort of came out of the blue, and I think Joe Biden sized up his opponent and suckered him into this debate deal. Now, to set the stage, let's just see where the campaigns are, because the campaigns are more or less in the same situation as the Ukraine war. Everybody was dug in, they're in trench warfare, nobody's advancing anyway, and so somebody needs to do something to change the dynamic of where the race is. Now, we don't see it here in California, but over the last month to 6 weeks, Joe Biden has spent between $2 and $5 million per state in each of the battleground states and is not really moving the needle. And whatever bounce he got off of the State of the Union has gone away. So he sees a static race and he needs to get it non-static before things get locked in and we get into the fall. So he challenged Trump's ego to a debate, and true to form, Trump accepted. So let's just sort of look at what that's going to mean. It's going to be on June 27th. It's going to be on CNN. Jake Tapper is going to be the moderator, so you can be sure that Trump will be fact-checked when he says it's on Thursday, because Tapper will do that. Biden and Trump are in a codependent relationship. I mean, they each need each other to survive or to have a reason to be. Biden has some specific objectives in this campaign. He's not appealing to disaffected Hispanics, disaffected young voters by his policies. So his new strategy, I think, is going to be to stand up Donald Trump and let those voters see the full, man in full Donald Trump. And he believes, and I think there's some justification to this, that will cause that voter bloc to move back to Biden. That's sort of his objective there. That's number one. Number two, he's going to go through 90 minutes or 2 hours or however long the debate is, and he's not going to drool, and he's going to be coherent, and he's going to show that he can compete mano a mano with Trump. And that's going to sort of address the senility issue, the too old for the job issue, and get him past that, which is a block with a lot of voters. Now, the third thing he's going to do is he's going to try and appeal, I think, finally, to the middle voters, the Nikki Haley voters, the 20% of Republicans this last week in Nebraska and Maryland who voted for Haley, and try and move those voters over. If he can overcome his penchant to say everybody's got to pay their fair share in taxes and start talking about unions. You know, unions are about 11% of the workforce, non-government workforce today, and go into the Bernieomics stuff. If he can discipline himself not to do the Bernie Sanders economics and appeal to those voters, he's got a real good chance of moving the needle in his campaign.
Let me ask you this. The idea that there's no audience this time, when I heard that, that was the first thing that signaled that this could be a real help to Biden. Is that a help to Biden, do you think?
It absolutely is, because Trump feeds off the audience and feeds off the audience reactions. And it encourages sort of a man show kind of drunk audience response. That's not going to be there this time. These debates, if you go back historically, Jim Baker is probably the best debate negotiator there ever was in setting the stage so that it benefited your candidate. Mike Dukakis was very focused on making sure the podium was the right size so he didn't look short.
Right.
All of those issues that people who are professionals and think about this get focused on before the debate gets agreed to. Who's going to be the moderators? Is there going to be balance? What station? Biden sort of rolled the table on Trump on this because Trump didn't have the good sense to think about any of these issues.
He reacted very quickly to this without even thinking about the consequences of no audience and other issues.
So that sets the stage for Biden to look better and to look presidential. Now, those were Biden's objectives. Trump has his own. He's got to look presidential in this debate. He's got to focus on gas, groceries, the border, the Israel flip-flops, and taxes, and speak to the needs and the aspirations of individual voters and not go into his own, personal grievance complaint kind of situation. And he's got to try and appeal to Haley voters as well, something he has so far utterly refused to do. So the question is, does Donald Trump have the discipline to act presidential, to avoid the personal grievance politics, to avoid the name calling, to stay focused on issues where Biden is vulnerable. I would not take that bet. If he does, he'll do well. But I don't think he's got the discipline to do that. Now, consider this. The trial will be over by the time of the debate. And if New York is like California, what's likely to be the situation, let's say he's convicted, is he will be awaiting a probation report going to the judge before sentencing. So the issue there is, does the convicted felon express remorse? Does he understand what he did was bad? Is he prepared to be rehabilitated? Is he a threat to society? And he's sitting there in this debate, all of those issues hanging over his head where he literally could go to jail. And what is he going to do? And once again, I don't know anybody who believes he's got the personal discipline to deal with that situation well.
If the trial for some reason is delayed and there's no verdict, Biden can't really speak to it, can he?
Well, he shouldn't speak to it. Trump will speak to it on his own. Trump will accuse Biden of using the Manhattan district attorney as his own personal legal cudgel in his, lawfare attack. And that's not a credible charge. The first rule in politics is when your opponent is blowing himself up, get out of the way and let him do it. And so I think that's what he's going to do. I think Biden got a pretty good dig in when he said, I understand you're free on Wednesdays.
Yeah,
that just sort of reinforces everything.
That was funny.
But here's the thing. I mean, Biden can still screw this up. I mean, if he loses his train of thought, which he's want to do, or if he starts going into this, you're not paying your fair share of taxes stuff and gives everybody the same economic arguments that are not selling to the public, people will write him off. So He's got his own things he's got to discipline himself on in this debate. The key thing is that both candidates have successfully avoided having RFK on the stage.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
He's got some interesting positions. He believes Biden has been too tough on Russia. He supports Israel. He supports guns, unlike most Democratic candidates. He's for early abortions. He's against late abortions. It looks like he's drawing, of his supporters, 32% of them had voted for Biden, 24% had voted for Trump. It looks like he's taking 8% from Trump and 7% for Biden, although those are numbers that are moving around very rapidly as we speak. And so who he benefits is state-specific and pretty even. His voters are described as Trump voters who usually vote Democratic. So that's caused both of them to be very apprehensive about his candidacy, and that's why they want to keep him off the debate stage. His positions have been described as socially conservative and fiscally liberal. Now, I will tell you, when I ran for office, I had a guy in town, Howard Amundsen, who spent a couple $100,000 to successfully keep me out of the state legislature. But he was the guy who funded a lot of far-right Christian activism and far-right candidates on school choice, very much against redevelopment agencies for some reason. That was his bumper sticker on his car, socially conservative, fiscally liberal, because that's the position that he has. So that tells you how sort of mixed up and amalgamated RFK Jr.'s support is, and how his philosophy sort of is a overarching kind of thing that covers several philosophical or non-philosophical positions.
You mentioned Haley. She's still lingering in the shadows.
Well, for a person who quit her campaign 2 months ago, she got 20% of the vote in Nebraska, 20% of the vote in Maryland. That's an indication that there are a lot of Republicans who are not prepared to pull the lever for Donald Trump, even in a primary. And as we've noticed in other states, in Maryland, hundreds of thousands of Republicans did not show up to vote in the primary. And there they had a senatorial primary. It was a big deal. So that was more indication that there is a large swath of Republicans who are not buying the Trump story, and no successful strategy by either Trump or Biden to appeal to that group of voters yet.
So is she preparing herself for 2028 to some degree?
I think so. I think she's decided she's going to be the person who says, I told you so. I could have been the alternative. If Trump loses, the Republican Party is in the ashes and needs to be rebuilt. And she will be somebody not tainted by Trump. And I have said and written before that Republican candidates not yet born will be answering for the policies and the activities of Donald Trump generations from now, much the way Democrats tried to put Herbert Hoover on the Republicans for the better part of 30 years, and much the way the Republicans after the Civil War waved the bloody shirt and ran against the Democrats as the party of secession 150 years ago.
All right, let's talk about something we haven't talked too much about, the Senate campaigns.
Well, the Senate campaigns, there's good news and bad news for the Democrats. The good news is that the incumbent Democratic senators are running ahead of Joe Biden in their states. What we think we see is a Biden problem, not a Democrat problem. That's the good news. The bad news is they're not running very far ahead of the Democrat. In Arizona, the Democrat is +3. In Nevada, they're tied. In Pennsylvania, it's Democrat these are Democrat incumbents now, +2. In Wisconsin, it's Democrat +7. We had in West Virginia this week, Jim Justice, the governor, was nominated, the Republican governor, for the Senate. Republicans will almost certainly take that seat, which will result in a 50-50 Senate. And in Maryland, David Trone, who was one of the founders of Total Wine, put $60 million of his own money into his campaign. He joins the Michael Bloomberg, Tom Steyer school of Let's Burn Money. And he lost. The Democrat Angela also Brooks, who was the county executive of Prince George's County, carried handily in the counties surrounding Washington, D.C. and Baltimore City and County to win with 54%. And she will face off against the Republican former governor, Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan has won statewide in Maryland. Larry Hogan is a moderate. Larry Hogan is not a Trump Kool-Aid drinker and was very popular when he left office in Maryland. Now, he's never had to run where he was not the guy at the top of the ticket. And so the Republican drop-off vote, both Angela Brooks and David Trone both got more votes than Hogan did winning the Republican primary. But nonetheless, that puts what would otherwise be a deeply blue Senate seat in play for the Republicans, and polls right now have Hogan leading. That's a tough race for him to win, but he is leading in the polls. So You've got one race that's definitely going to go against the Democrats, another race that very likely could go against the Democrats, and 4 races where you've got Democratic incumbents, all of whom have got tough races on their hands. The Democrats think they have a shot at Ted Cruz, but I don't really see that in Texas. So it's going to be how many Democratic seats can the Republicans take, and that's the map today.
We've talked about this before, the money aspect of all of this. The Democrats in general have a lot more money to spend, and some of the money is actually going to trickle down to those Senate candidates. Can that money help those candidates in beating the Republican Party?
Yeah, so here's the thing. The Democrats, particularly in these targeted states, are investing a lot of money in campaign infrastructure and opening headquarters and putting people on the streets and voter registration, all of the mechanics of a campaign that the Republicans and the RNC are not able to do because money's been diverted to Trump's legal fees, because they're not raising enough money relative to the Democrats, because there's a lot of outside groups helping the Democrats. So all of these Democratic incumbents will have a significant fundraising advantage over the Republican opponent in those races.
And we've said before, money isn't the whole factor, but it certainly helps in these cases, especially if the polls show a close run, I would think.
You'd much rather be the guy with more money than less, although as David Trone has just shown, it doesn't make the entire difference.
Right, exactly. Okay, finally, and we're putting this at the end of the list this week, the Trump trial continues this week with a lot of theatrics, a lot of interesting side things that have nothing to do with anything except entertainment.
Well, it is. Now, most commentators say that this has been a good week for Trump and the defense because Michael Cohen has told a lot of lies over the years, and all of them were characterized and categorized in the trial and discussed. And he got a little bit back and forth about his memory. We'll see if that makes a definitive difference and creates reasonable doubt. It's a spectacle. It's an awful spectacle for America to have this trial going on, to have Republican leaders standing out in front of the courthouse, demeaning the court, demeaning the justice system, prejudging the results of the case. That is not good for democracy. And Trump is his own worst enemy. I mean, every time he steps in front of a microphone, he makes his case worse. I don't know anybody who believes he will actually take the stand and testify in his own behalf. He should not. That will just put him in more legal jeopardy. But it's a spectacle. It looks like it's going to wrap up next week. Let's hope for the sake of the democracy that it does.
I think we covered it once again, Keith. Nice job. Thank you for your insight into all of this. Please subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a comment or leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Like our Facebook page. What else can we have them do? Oh, share it with your friends.
Share it with your friends. Absolutely.
And we'll be back again next week with another edition of Red versus Blue.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.